Hello and welcome to On the Right Track, Career Stories with Jane Christophe, a video series and podcast about real people, their real careers, and real lives. I'm your host, Jane Christophe, and today I've got Dr. Graham Slaughter with us. He has a very interesting story, an extremely busy life, and I'm just going to let you start talking, Graham. What do you do? Tell us about yourself.
I am a physician. Specifically, I am a general internist. So I cover things which are basically from neck to knees that are non-surgical. So people who have pneumonias or heart conditions or unexplained things will come to an internist. I will manage patients who were admitted to the hospital who don't need procedures. I'm not a surgeon. With my last name, you wouldn't want me to be a surgeon. And I work at Sunnybrook. Sometimes I'm doing clinics and sometimes I'm covering patients on the wards. I'm not working today. And that just, you need some downtime. I also have 4 children, so I have a very busy life at home. And my days are very full.
Yes, and you're also married to a surgeon, correct?
She's an obstetrician, yes.
Yeah, so you have a very busy family, including a newborn. You're 4.
Yep, she's just turned 5 months old.
Okay, well, thank you for your time today, Graham. Tell us how you arrived where you are today.
I was in school for a really, really long time. 30 years ago, we were thinking about a formal at the Sky Dome, as it was called then, and then going off to Western. And when I finished an undergraduate degree, I applied to medical school. I didn't get in, so I went to grad school and did studies in molecular biology. My boss is now the chief of staff at St. Mike's in Toronto, but he's a cardiologist. And I was going to be a cardiologist for the longest time. I transferred from a master's to a PhD program after a couple of years because the work that we were doing got a little bit more involved. And when I finished my doctorate, I had gotten into medical school and had to defer for a year because they wanted me to round up my PhD to make it look more polished. So I had to wait a year. And that meant I started medical school in 2001 instead of 2000. I was at Western. I did 4 years of medicine there. Got to do some interesting stuff like rural electives in Sarnia. We got to see what it was to do work in psychiatry, in surgery, in obstetrics, in pediatrics and family. And I decided that I wanted to be an internist because I liked the intellectual challenge of doing it, but I didn't really have the manual skill to do the surgical procedures. I can't tie knots the same way that people need to. I don't feel as comfortable working with my hands as people who go into the surgical disciplines do. So, but I like the intellectual challenge of figuring out what is going well with a person, what is going wrong with a person, and how can we figure out how to get them back into their best state of health.
Mm-hmm.
Some of what I do is preventive, but a lot of it is response to an acute problem.
That's so interesting, the problem solving that you deal with daily, all day long, every day. Do you work at night?
It depends if I'm on service. If there are times when I am the person on call, so I'm taking care of inpatients in 1 night in 4 when I'm doing that, I don't have to be in the hospital all night. I will usually go in the evening to review cases or see people that are really sick. But because I work at a teaching facility, there are residents that I am responsible for who are doing the first thing. So I'm on the phone hearing about what the problem is and giving them some feedback as to their approach and also some suggestions as to what's to do next. I do an awful lot of teaching, actually. I'm one of the clerkship coordinators for the medicine rotation, so 3rd-year medical students. And I do a lot of teaching of residents because it's their first exposure to working with patients in clinics. It's easier to manage patients when they're in the hospital because you have a lot of control. It's a lot harder to do it when you're looking at them in clinics because you can only see them once and then they're going off to their lives for a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to see them again thereafter. So it takes a little bit more experience to do that. The teaching part is really rewarding. I did a lot of teaching when I was a grad student. I was a TA for 5 years. And just the experience of watching people gain new knowledge, gain confidence in their abilities is really rewarding.
Okay, so tell us what a week looks like in your life.
A week where I'm on service would be, I'm going to get a phone call the night before I start from the person I'm taking over from. And we're going to spend anywhere between 20 minutes and 2 hours going over everybody who's admitted to the hospital on that service and what's wrong with them and what the plan is. Then I'm going to go in the next morning for 8 o'clock in the morning and meet everybody that's on the team. I'll have been up at the computer at about 6:30 just looking to see what's happened overnight. After meeting everybody and having an academic discussion for 45 minutes, what we call morning report, then we'll go off and meet with the team and run the list as to who's been admitted overnight. Then we'll go and see patients. We'll discuss all of their problems with the physiotherapy and occupational therapy and social work teams to see who needs supports in the community and who can be discharged, who's going to a nursing home and who's going to rehab. Then I'll go and see patients that they asked me to see, or I'll go and see the new ones and write notes on them. By the end of the afternoon, we'll have done probably 1 or 2 teaching sessions, and we'll review the cases for whoever's staying on call that night. If I'm on call, I'll be on the phone probably half the night. I'll go in between 10 and 1 in the morning, and then we'll get up and do it all again the next day at 8 o'clock. I'll do that Monday to Friday, and then Saturdays and Sundays, it's compacted into about 4 hours each day, but I'm still on the phone the whole time. And then when the week is over, I'll make a phone call to the person who's taking over for me, and we'll give them all the rundown information about the patients that they're going to be responsible for. That's a typical week when I'm on service. If I'm in clinics, there's not the handover. It's just I'll be writing notes all evening trying to catch up on the results of the patients that we've seen in clinic.
What do you love most about your work?
It's getting somebody through a difficult period. In some cases, the outcomes are not always positive. It could be that we found out that there's something wrong with you and you need to go and see someone for treatment right now. But we've got you to a point where there's no doubt, there's less uncertainty, and we can get you to what you need in order to hopefully get back to your best state of health. Teaching residents and watching them make the leap from, I can just gather all this information, to I can synthesize this and now I know what this is going to be. I can confidently present it and here's my plan and they're correct. Yeah. That's what you really want to see is the growth.
Okay, and what's the hardest part of your work?
There's endless time sinks. There's always committee work that you might get into. There's always paperwork that you might get into. You have to document everything in a very specific way. You have to be really professional about what you say, how you document it. You have to be very careful about what you say when you're talking to patients because you can't use any loose language. You have to be professional all the time. And just the fatigue of having to carry that around and then come home and have 4 kids jump on you.
It sounds crazy. I want you to tell us a bit more about your work-life balance, if there is any, and how that works.
The nice thing about what I do is that I do weeks at a time. So there are weeks where I am unscheduled. I have a longitudinal clinic on Thursday afternoons, and that is my only clinical function. I may have some teaching, I may have some administrative work to do, but the rest of the time, I have at least a couple of hours where I can do stuff. And that might mean going to get groceries or dealing with stuff around the house, playing with my kids. The balance comes from just having that time to just to decant from all the stresses. I like playing golf. I play less than I'd like and more than I can afford. It used to be money, now it's time. So I like playing sports with my kids. A little different when you've only got a backyard instead of a park, but that's what you do. So I like reading, and these are the little things that I'll do to recharge.
Okay, so tell us about how you became a doctor. You did your 4-year undergraduate degree. You didn't get into med school your first round. You did a master's. Talk to us about high school. How did you know medicine in high school, or did you?
I'm in a medical family. My father was an internist who specialized in kidneys. He was a nephrologist. My mom was an ICU nurse before she got into sort of health policy and privacy. So there was always talk about this around the table. I wanted to do research for a while because I did a couple of summers of it when I was in high school and then right after high school. And it was, am I going to do science? Am I going to do medicine? Am I going to do both? And I realized when I got into the clinical aspect of it that doing research well means you have to devote an incredible amount of time with it, and being a good clinical doctor and a good research doctor is a very, very hard thing to do. especially with a young family. And I decided at that point that something had to give, and it was the research. I was going to be a cardiologist. That's what I thought I was interested in, was doing heart stuff, because that was what my research was in. But I ran into a unique challenge when I was a second year resident. So I'm finished medical school. I'm on the second of 3 core years of internal medicine. My mentor was a cardiologist who had esophageal cancer, and he died in May of my second year of residency. And I had gotten married at the end of my first year of residency. My wife was still a med student at that point, and we could not match together. So she wound up being in Toronto, and I was in London.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that I was going to get to Toronto, because I decided I'd rather stay married than pick my career necessarily of choice, was going to be to do general medicine instead of cardiology, because there were so many people who were competing for the few spots in cardiology. I wasn't at Toronto doing cardiology. I didn't have enough face time with the people who were going to be making the decisions that I was going to be a strong candidate for it. So I decided to do general medicine. I find that I have a lot more breadth in what I do. I have a lot more freedom. I got a job right after I finished my residency, which is not a given, in an academic center, and I have been a clinical teacher now for 11 years.
Okay, so let's backtrack though, Graham. I want to hear about high school.
High school?
First of all, you went to high school at a younger age than most of your peers.
I finished high school when I was 16. Mm-hmm. I did a 4-year high school at a time when a 5-year was common. I liked the biology, I liked the chemistry, I liked the sciences. Medicine was certainly on the radar. Was I convinced that I was going to do it? No, because I looked at what it did to my dad, in the sense that there were some times where he would get a page, he'd leave in the middle of dinner, and we wouldn't see him until after bedtime. I had reasonable study skills in high school. They were not perfect. But I found I picked it up as I got through university because I was interested in the material. I did an undergraduate degree in microbiology at Western, had a really good group of classmates. And my choices in high school sort of led me to wanting to do science and see if medicine was going to be in the future. It turns out it was, but not immediately. I applied for medical school in 1994. I didn't start until 2001.
Mm-hmm. And what was that like? You didn't give up on your dream?
No, I didn't. I was at grad school. I always sort of kept it in the background. The test that you have to do for a lot of universities is called the MCAT. It's one of the aptitude tests associated for medicine, and I had to rewrite it because my scores lapsed after 5 years. So I had to sort of keep that up to date, and it turned out it worked out fairly well. My scores were higher 5 years later, but I just had a good day.
You must have been fed up with all the studying by the end.
Doing a PhD means knowing absolutely everything about absolutely nothing, because you are the world expert on a topic which can be extremely narrowly defined. And so I realized that research was not going to be my forte. I'm still interested. I know the grammar of research, how to interpret studies, and that's useful in evaluating the literature, how you're going to make people feel better. But it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me.
And then how did you feel when you were not admitted to med school right away, and then after your PhD and you were asked to defer med school for another year? Like it was a long period of waiting to get to that goal that you had from high school.
Yeah. I had a committee meeting for my PhD in August of 2000, and I'm supposed to start med school on the day after Labor Day, September 2000. And I had to sit through the meeting, and I'd put in a lot of effort, and they told me, this isn't enough. You're gonna have to either abandon your PhD or defer your medical school. It was one of the longest days of my life, but I got the deferral. That wasn't necessarily a given. They could say, I'm sorry, you have to come this year. And then I worked very hard for the next year to get it into a shape where I could finish my PhD. I still had to do my defenses during my first year of medical school, but it worked out.
So you really persevered to get to where you wanted to be.
Yep.
What would you tell your younger self?
A lot of effort at the right time makes all the difference.
Okay.
Being able to put forward a lot of work in a short period of time, you can't sustain it, but being able to focus really hard for a short period of time can get you where you need to be. David Naylor was the dean of the medical school and a general internist like me, and he worked with a lot of people that I work with now. His comment was focus and finish. And that's what you have to do. Is it may mean chunking a large project into manageable bits, but as long as you keep your eyes on the ultimate goal
Yeah.
and you get through those chunks
Mm.
and they're high quality and they blend into each other, then you can achieve an awful lot in a fairly dense period of time, a fairly short period of time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you feel the most important skill is for students who are interested in doing medical school down the road? What should they be focusing on the most?
Um, you need intellectual curiosity. You need good study habits and good research skills in terms of being able to come up with answers to questions that are higher up in the intellectual taxonomy. You have to be able to synthesize information, evaluate it properly. Um, you have to be able to handle a large volume of material. You have to balance that with doing things that aren't going to make you burn out. I
Mhm.
was voted most likely to burn out in high school by age 30. I was still in school at age 30. Um, my younger self and students thinking about this, for medicine, you have to make sure it's what you want because it is a calling. You're going to give away most of your 20s and 30s to get where you need to be professionally.
Mhm.
That can be a very large sacrifice. There's a lot of time, there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of money involved.
Mhm.
Speak to someone you know who's in the medical field and what their highest highs and the lowest lows have been getting there.
Mhm.
You need a mentor in medicine. I had several for different parts of things, and I'm very grateful to those people.
Okay. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Mm-hmm.
You're one of our frontline essential workers right now, Graham, and you're a dad to a newborn. So thank you so much for sharing your stories already. Okay, so let's say you had a chance to redo everything and you're not going to be a doctor. What would you be?
I don't know. I always had a dream that I'd get on Jeopardy and that just coast on that for a while, but
You can still do that.
not it. Well, I've tried a couple of times. I got as far as the second stage auditions twice, but I haven't heard from Alex yet. I'm still working on that. I don't know. Don't really have a head for business. Probably would have been in the sciences. Might have been a teacher because I do like teaching and I do a fair bit of it. Um, if I'd found a research project that went really well, maybe you can make a career of that. I might have done something in the biological sciences. Might have just been a university professor doing some teaching.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Graham. I really appreciate your time and your insights, all that you've shared with our viewers today. And it's really nice catching up with you all these years. So thanks
Nice to
for
see you,
coming,
Jen.
Graham, and stay well.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you so much for joining us. If you liked the video, give us a like, and even better, subscribe. For more information, check out the links below. You'll get lots of scoop about other social media platforms, more information about our interview guests, and the services available from Right Track Education. Have a great day and best wishes to everyone.